Okay, for this first video, we are going to go through a straightforward install of putting Windows 10 IoT Core on a Raspberry Pi 2. So let's get started. So first thing we'll do is we'll mount the ISO file in a Windows 10 VM so that we can get to the install file for Windows 10 IoT Core. We'll start the install, and as we wait for the install to start and we go through the various click next and accept agreements and so forth, we'll wait just a few seconds for this to complete the install. We'll click yes. It'll go through its different install phases. And actually this will probably take a little bit longer than it does in the video, since I actually cut some of the time out that actually took the copy files, etc., over to the into the Windows 10 VM as part of the install. Alright, so we complete the install. It'll actually launch the Windows IoT Core Windows Watcher. And actually what that the Core Watcher will do, once we get the Raspberry Pi up and going, it'll actually show up in this window, and then we can do various different things from that window once we get it started. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and mount the USB stick that has the SD card in it that we're going to write the firmware to, so that we can use that to boot up our Raspberry Pi. And basically I'll just go and click Start Window and look for the Windows IoT Core, and what we'll end up using is the Windows IoT Image Helper, and that will actually install the image onto our SD card. So once that starts up, we will pick our SD card, or actually our USB device that has an SD card in it. We'll browse for the image, which should be in the default location, so you shouldn't have to look for it. It's under Raspberry Pi 2, then the flash.ffu, and we'll open that flash image up, and we'll flash it to the USB drive. So just keep in mind, it does erase the content like it normally does if you flash an SD card with a certain image. So it'll go through, it'll take a few minutes to actually go through the install, but again, I've cut the long wait out of here, so it'll get done pretty quickly. Once this gets completed, your firmware, the flash image will be written to the USB drive that has the SD card in it, and then we can simply, once this is completed, we can close this. Yep, it's completed. And now we can go ahead and take that SD card and put it in the Raspberry Pi and boot it up. Alright, so we've got the Raspberry Pi here. We've got our various connections, HDMI, network cable, mouse, and keyboard, and then you see the SD card inserted in there. So let's go ahead and start it up. And it'll take a few minutes to start up. Obviously the Raspberry Pi is a pretty low powered device, so it'll take a few minutes for Windows to boot up. You'll see the typical Windows 10 graphics and animations as the Raspberry Pi starts to boot up. And again, this is a little bit of a wait that I cut out the various wait times. All right, so then eventually you'll get a screen, welcome to Windows 10 IoT Core. And it looks similar to Windows 10 if you've seen Windows 10 when you install it. Basically it's telling you to wait till it gets a few things ready. And once it starts up, the first screen we'll be seeing is the screen to pick whichever language you'd like it to be in. There's a little Raspberry Pi image. So we're going to pick English, and then go ahead and click next. You'll also see the device name, its IP address, and the OS version in this screen. So go ahead and click next. And then this will eventually take you to a screen that gives you all the information you need, like device name, network. You see it's got an IP address, the different USB or connected devices, and that should be, oh, actually you can click on the settings there at the top right, and you'll be able to see the language. You can also click on network and Wi-Fi. Obviously we don't have any Wi-Fi connection, it's an Ethernet connection, so that all looks good. And then if you go back to device info, screen, you can see the various different info. There's also the power button over there, of course, you can restart. And then also there's a tutorial screen on there that has different things. All right. So, like I said, once the device gets brought up, you'll be able to see it in the Core Watcher screen. So if you simply click, or you can right click on that, and it'll actually give you the option to bring it up in a web browser, and you can do configuration and various things inside the web browser. You can also do some of the configuration settings in PowerShell as well, but we'll show this. All right, so it's it'll ask for your user ID and password as a default user ID and password administrator, and it's password. You can actually look it up. I don't remember what it was exactly. I think it's actually it's P@SSW0RD, and then all the letters are lowercase. So once we launch the browser and get it signed in, you'll probably want to change the password. You can see you can change the device name, password, etc. And then you've got various different pages through the web browser that you can look at different things in regards to Windows IoT Core and the Raspberry Pi. So this particular screen, you can see any apps you have installed. The next screen, you can see various processors that are running. Looks like a typical Windows box with lots of different processes running. You can also look down and look at the performance. This will give you an idea of how much CPU utilization is going on. You can also see here where the Raspberry Pi has a gig of memory, and it's using about 266 megs of that memory right now. And then there's also the debugging page that we'll look at next. Then you've got live kernel dumps. You can download the kernel dump and so forth. Then you've got the tracing, which is the Windows event tracing. Then you can also look at performance tracing. You can look at any devices that are connected to the Raspberry Pi. Then, of course, you can look at any Bluetooth devices that might happen to be paired. If you've got a ability to pair Bluetooth devices, you can see that on that page. And then again, or lastly, you can see the networking. And then you can obviously see we're connected to the network and have a IP address. And we don't have any Wi-Fi adapters. So that's pretty much it for this short video on how to get Windows IoT 10 Core installed on a Raspberry Pi.